having these things on a regular basis, probably have one scheduled every month. And so tell your friends, have everybody come. The more the merrier. We want lots of people. And make sure that you fill out your PIFs. So how many of you don't know what PIFs are? Raise your hand. Some of you don't? Okay, so on the email to register for this event, there is something called there's a form, a long form filled out. It's a terrible form. It's asks for way too much stuff, all right? But we can't help it because it was designed by the federal government, okay? And so we're kind of stuck with doing that, and it's a way of keeping track of who's coming and what the people who come to these events do, what you all do. And so we have to do that for every person every time. Now, once you log in and get a password, you don't have to fill it out every time. You simply can use that information. So if you haven't done so, please go on the website and do your PIF. If you're having trouble, if you're the units and you're having trouble logging on, and we realize that some of the units haven't been able to do that, would just encourage you, go home and do it. Because once you do that, we can then send you the link, so then way you can get your CME and CNE, which is really what you want to get, right? I mean, we all like the lunches, and Dr. Temple's hot, but that only lasts for a certain period of time. Okay, so now let me go through with the introduction. So I really want to introduce Dr. Jeff Temple. And I have this really long description of him. He's an associate professor and licensed psychologist and director of behavioral health and research in the Department of OBGYN at UTMB. He's got a lot more stuff. If you're interested, you can go to his webpage and look it up. But this guy has done some really cool stuff with what kids do with texting and sexting. And he really is one of the experts in the world on this sort of thing. And given, the field that we're in, and particularly in talking about dealing with HIV, most people get HIV when they're young people. They're either late teens or in their early 20s. And so understanding the milieu in which that occurs, I think, is really, really important. And we're really happy to have you here. So without any further ado, this is Dr. Temple.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Thank you. Let me turn this on. All right, so he mentioned my sexting research. So by show of hands, who's heard me talk before? Oh, good, because I can repeat some of my jokes. So, all right, so really it kind of all happened on accident in terms of my getting involved in social media and sexting research. I am mainly a domestic violence researcher, a dating violence researcher, and a healthy adolescent relationship. So really I started my career out looking at the mental and physical health effects of intimate partner violence, so adult domestic violence. Got really interested in adolescent population, especially with respect to preventing dating violence and promoting healthy relationships, and what healthy relationships look like, what unhealthy relationships look like, and so forth. So, and that does actually relate. So I'm not an HIV researcher, but it does, IPV is one of the stronger predictors of HIV, especially globally. So if you look outside of the US, there is almost a one-in-one relationship between HIV and IPV being intimate partner violence. So how it came across, and I apologize for the few of you that have heard me say this to you, and Liz for the 5 times you've heard this, but so basically I was I'm still doing, with Liz's help, a longitudinal study looking at when kids started off in high school, following them up annually. We just finished our 6th year, so this is they started with freshmen, now they're 2 years post-high school. We have annual data on these about 1,000 kids, looking at everything from dating violence to substance use, a bunch of different types of substances, alcohol, cigarettes, marijuana, bath salts, salvia, synthetic marijuana, basically anything you can think of. Risky sexual behavior, as it is especially relevant for today's talk. And during the years 1 and 2 of the study, I was coming up with the questionnaire for the next year, and there was something on the news about sexting. So this is I promise this has a point, because it's going to come back to why I'm even here talking to you guys. So there's something on the news about sexting. I was actually in a hotel room in Dallas and constructing the questionnaire because it was due the next day to the IRB. And there's something on the news about sexting and how it was going to be the end of our world and kids these days, that sort of tired talk when it comes to adolescence. So let me just put this on a prettier thing. Why isn't this working? All right, do you mind looking at that? All right, so while she's doing that, I was, so I decided to right there, since I was doing the questionnaire, to add 4 questions on sexting. So whether or not, as teens, we were asking teens, whether or not you send a naked picture to another teen through text or email, which, by the way, teens do not email, so that was a stupid part of the question that I put on. Thank you. So it works now? Cool. Sorry about that. And whether or not they asked for a sext, and whether or not they asked someone else for a sext, and then whether or not they were bothered by being asked, which the bothered question was really stupid, and I'll tell you why that in a second. So we came up with those 4 questions, and we added them to the survey. We ended up being the first researchers to ever ask about this in an adolescent population, and a year later, we were on CNN and BBC and everywhere. It was, I think, 600 million hits is what they said that we reached, and up until the whole Zika and Ebola stuff that happened at UTMB, it was the most hits that a UTMB research has ever seen. So it was pretty cool. And then I say this often, is that when the Ebola thing happened, and that nurse in Maine, she was quarantined there in Maine. I was really hoping that while she was there, she would sex someone. So we kind of corner the market on the news. So she didn't, unfortunately. I'll also say this: 600 million people that my story reached, not one of them thought it would be a good idea to sext me. Just as it was disappointing. So what's good? So one good story. I have a lot about sexting, but I'm gonna tell you one good story about it, and then I'll start moving on to more of my presentation. But my favorite one is I was doing this radio interview with a folk by the name of Sylvester Turner in Atlanta. He has me on. It's a live radio. He brings me on. He welcomes me, and then he goes into like a 2-minute monologue about a story. And his story is about a kid that was playing basketball, fell, scraped up his leg. His mom took him to the doctor's office, the hospital. They released him. She took him home, and he ended up dying later, right? And I'm like, well, okay, this is a horrible story. And I'm thinking, what the hell does this have to do with sexting? And then about halfway through the story, it's like a 2-minute monologue, which is a long time on live radio, I realized that he's talking about sepsis and not sexting. So he comes back on, and he says, well, so Dr. Temple, what do you think of this? And I said, well, Mr. Turner, I think that, that's a story on sepsis. I'm here to, talk about sexting. And he says, no, I know, Doc. I was just wondering what you thought of it. And I'm a psychologist. I don't like blood. And I said, well, I think that, that sucks. And I was a little more articulate than that, but that was a good one. So since then, though, I've become more interested, kind of an accidental expert on this area. So not only sexting, but we've also started to look at social media and video games. And, I really wanted to be known for dating violence and healthy relationships. But now if you Google my name, pictures of naked girls come up. So it's a real safe way to look at porn at work. And by the way, welcome, units over there. Don't look at my name right now. But if you do, turn Safe Search off. That's the only way to do it. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit more about kind of social media and a little bit more about the ways people hook up today maybe versus the way we might have hooked up in the past. And a lot of things have changed, as you guys might know. So I grew up in the 80s and 90s, right in the AIDS epidemic. I was scared, really, really scared of HIV. I also have a little bit of OCD and health anxiety, so there was that. Really, really scared, though. So scared that let's just say that, not me, this is someone else we're talking about, but say that this person, maybe the first time he lost his virginity did use protection but still was so scared and went and got a HIV test after. And let's just say I'll just use I for the ease of communication. So I was a late bloomer, and I went to my college nurse and to get the results. This was 3 months later, because that's what it was back then. You get the blood test and you wait 2 weeks, and I'm really scared because I was positive that I had HIV, and really, really scared. I illustrate this to tell you guys that it was a different area back then. Also, my psychosis or my anxiety. Anyway, she has me back there, and she says, you're negative, and I get really excited and hug her, and she goes, next time you should use protection. And I'm like, oh no, I did. I used protection, and. But that's the kind of different environment that I think that it is now versus then. Then it was much more. This was on the front of all of our brains. We had friends that had died of AIDS, and so we knew it, and we were scared of it. And I think we are a lot more cognizant of it and use protection. Versus now, I think that it has been demystified, and maybe not in necessarily a good way. So now people are having. I will say that we're doing better with, over time. Teens are having a slight bit less sex, and they're also getting less likely to have unintended pregnancies relative to a couple decades ago. So we are getting a little bit better. So I don't think we could blame all of the contraction, AIDS contraction, HIV contraction, STD contraction on this new era of how we hook up. But I think it does make it a lot easier, and they've done some really cool studies looking at Craigslist and some of the Backpage and stuff that we'll talk about here in a little while that makes it a heck of a lot easier to hook up. All right. So, I guess I should have done this first. I'm going to do these things. We're going to identify risky behaviors in adolescence, especially with respect to technology, and how increased accessibility to the different mobile apps may impact HIV, STI transmission. And then we're going to talk about safe technology practices. All right, so when we think about sexual risk behaviors, these are usually what we think about. With adolescents, it's early age, so it's usually between 13 or 14 or earlier. And I have a daughter that's turning 13 in about 2 weeks, so she's going to wait till she's married, apparently. Yeah, I'm just going to ignore all the statistics. So early debut, so 14 or earlier usually, multiple sexual partners, not using protection, and then using drugs or alcohol prior to or during the sexual intercourse. And so why drugs or alcohol? Well, usually your inhibitions are lowered, so you're more likely to have group sex, or you're more likely to have anal sex, which has higher transmission rates. So that's one of the reasons. You're less likely to use protection as well if you use drugs or alcohol before. Also, we see this with domestic violence, teen dating violence, intimate partner violence. We see much higher rates of sexual risk-taking behaviors that are associated with teen dating violence. And it's oftentimes goes one and the same. And you'll see this a lot from folks that have worked with women in violent relationship, women or girls, is that oftentimes it's the physical violence that isn't what women will talk about. So has anyone worked in a battered women's shelter or worked with? So oftentimes it's not the physical violence, it's not the broken bones, it's not the bruises, it's two things, usually. And you guys can back me up or refute me, but it's psychological abuse, being called stupid and incompetent and worthless, and all the while alienating the woman from her resources that she might otherwise get. And then it's sexual abuse. And that is the forced intercourse. So a husband comes home drunk, forces her down, and then rapes her. So rape happens quite a bit. And in marital situations, about 14% of married women have been raped. We've done some research where we've shown that marital rape is as or more damaging to women's mental health than stranger rape. And that makes sense. A lot of people might ask, well, how does a woman get raped? And in fact, unfortunately, in a lot of countries, it's still legal to rape your wife. Even in the U.S., up until the mid-'80s, it was legal to rape your wife in many states. And even today, it's considered less egregious in some states to rape your wife than it is to rape someone else. Texas is an exception. It's a rape is a rape is a rape. So so we do see a huge link between STIs, HIVs, and violence, and also sexual risk behavior, especially when we get with adolescents. It's often if you locate a girl or a boy that's in a violent relationship, whether it's a victim or perpetrator, they're substantially more likely to have STIs. So STIs being sexually transmitted infections. So we know that by the time a person graduates from high school, there's a good chance that they've had sex. So about half of girls and boys by the time they graduate high school have had sex. And that number has remained pretty stable, maybe even gone down a tiny bit over the last couple decades. We also know that a lot of them are having recent sex. So this is not just lifetime sex, but if you look at that 34% is during the previous 3 months. And then I think most importantly, that of those 34% that had recent sexual intercourse, almost half did not use a condom the last time they had sex, which is, as you guys know, it really, I think, is almost a difference. So I know that my daughter's going to have sex. Whether it's high school or college, she's going to have sex. I don't care necessarily about that as long as there's protection used. Because if there's protection used, it cuts all the dangers to very minuscule, negligible numbers. So whether it's STIs or HIV or unintended pregnancies. So I think that's really the important takeaway from this slide, that number of 41% of those with recent sexual partners that did not use a condom. So that's the part that I worry about quite a bit. We also know that there is something called reproductive coercion. By show of hands, have you guys heard of reproductive coercion? So it's coming up in the world in terms of it's a problem that's been there for a long time, but I think right now we're just starting to recognize it. So I just came off of a stint as co-chair of the State Task Force on Domestic Violence. One of the things that they talked about a lot there, and that's starting to get more press, is this idea that guys and girls, we'll use guys first, but they will sabotage women's birth control, whether that means taking out the implanted device, preventing her from taking birth control, not you wearing a condom, raping her, that sort of stuff, in order to impregnate her, to coerce her. So it's a way of control and power. Now we've also seen the same thing, I think, certainly less violently, but the other way, if you swap the genders. But right now, I think the focus is on male to female, and that sort of reproductive coercion. So I work in the Department of OB-GYN. Is anyone here from OB-GYN? So I thought I recognized you. That's right. So what we see oftentimes is that if a teen couple comes in or a young adult couple, sometimes we have to talk to the girl by herself without her boyfriend if he's controlling and doesn't want her to take birth control, and sometimes have to give her birth control under the table, so to speak. So 15% had sex with 4 or more people during their life. This is by the time they graduate high school. So that's a pretty high number. And of course, the more partners we get, the riskier it is for a number of things. And then the last number doesn't really mesh well, right? We would want that higher. So only 22% of sexually experienced students have ever been tested for HIV. I think that goes through a lot of things. So I think, one, we have to make HIV testing easier and more accessible for these kids. So whether if it's part of schools, and some schools do have this. I think it also points to the fact of the nature of humans, not just teens. I think teens a little bit more so, but the idea of invulnerability. I think it also goes to the fact of what that story I told about that embarrassing young man at the beginning, is that it's not on the forefront of our minds as it was when I was growing up. So I think it speaks to a ton of things. So when we look at sexual risk behaviors on a national scale, we see that nearly 10,000 aged 13 to 24, and that's the age that oftentimes these are reported, diagnosed with HIV infection in the U.S. in 2013. So quite a few, and then if you really look at within that 10,000, it's a lot of young, gay, and bisexual men, especially women, men of color as well. And I think that has a lot to do with the education surrounding HIV, and we'll talk about that in a second. So all new HIV infections in the U.S. and 72% of new HIV infections among youth in 2010. So that goes with what Phil talked about at the beginning, is that we don't usually typically see 40-year-olds getting HIV. It's these, and they do, don't get me wrong, but when do we participate in risky sexual behavior? Oftentimes when we're young, and that increases the risk, especially, again, with gay and bisexual men. Though, I hate to say that because it's true, it's out there, but I don't want to, when we talk about this with young folks, is to think that they can't get it because I'm not gay or bisexual. So half of the 20 million new STDs were among young people. Then 270,000 babies, this goes to unintentional pregnancies, were born to teen girls aged 15 to 19 in 2013. And we see this in our community, right? I mean, here at UTMB, and then also if you go to the various schools around here, you're going to see a high number of pregnant girls. We had in our study, I think and I'm not naive. I know about this research, but I was just dumbfounded that when I started out this study with ninth graders and they just looked so young and normal. Not normal's the wrong word. Please strike that. Young and innocent is the right word. Is the one I was looking for. And then like the next year, a good percentage of them are pregnant, and it's cliche, but they're kids themselves. And so a lot of high schools have made, to their credit, including Ball, have made the school environment a little more accommodating to pregnant girls so that they don't drop out and they extend their education. So this is a study that we did. Dr. Shorey, who's the first author of the study, is a colleague of mine. This is with the research on the Dating It Safe. That's the name of the study that we run, the longitudinal study. And what we did was look at dating violence and substance use as predictors of future risky sexual behavior. So there's a lot of research out there that shows that they're related. There's very little research that shows that they're related over time, so on a temporal, longitudinal level. And so we looked at it basically at time one. We looked at their mean sexual behavior score. So this was how much sex did they have, how much risky sex did they have. This was time one on this study was when most kids were sophomores in high schools and several were juniors as well. We saw that African Americans were having a little bit more sex than white adolescents with no differences. Hispanics were right in the middle with no significant differences. Females a little bit more than males, and that 42% of the sample reported having sex at some point during their lifetime. So that's similar to what we looked at, 47% by the time they graduate high school, maybe a little bit higher by this time. And then at the follow-up assessments, this was a year later, so when they were juniors and seniors, and you still see the African American a bit higher than Caucasian Hispanic. This time the genders flipped. And then 53%, which is about 6% higher, so we have a little bit more sexually active sample than the nation does. And so basically what we looked at here was the title kind of gives it away, but we found that dating violence at time one predicted risky sexual behavior. So if they were in a violent relationship and or if they used substances, alcohol and drugs, they are more likely to partake in risky sexual behaviors over the next year, even when we controlled for their baseline risky sexual behavior. So we can't say it caused it, but we can say that with at least some kids that the dating violence and the substance use came first, which is important from a prevention standpoint. If we want to prevent risky sexual behavior, maybe we do a good job by preventing dating violence and preventing substance use. And that's a lot of my work, especially where we are now, is my goal is to, I started off with an interest in dating violence and promoting healthy relationships. But then in doing more and more of the work, I realized that a lot of the same kids that are in violent relationships are the same kids that are doing drugs and drinking alcohol, are the same kids that are partaking in risky sexual behavior. So it's very rare that you have just a kid in a violent relationship or just a kid using substances are just a kid partaking in risky sexual behavior. You're usually doing all three. So it's really a waste of time, money, and resources when we go to schools and say, hey, let's have a program on dating violence, and let's use a lot of your resources and time, and then come back a week later and say, hey, let's do something on bullying, and then come back a week later, let's do something on substance use, a week later on healthy sexual education, and then something else, something else. So what we really started to do now, what Liz and I are doing, is more of a comprehensive prevention program where we target the risk and protective factors of all these risky behaviors. So we're not just targeting dating violence, we're not just targeting substance use, we're targeting the shared risk and protective factors, which are like conflict resolution skills, refusal skills, that sort of thing. And the program that we're working with is one called Fourth R. So the fourth R is reading, writing, arithmetic. The fourth R, which, by the way, only 2 of those start with R. So reading, writing, arithmetic, and the fourth R is relationships, right? So we're really focusing on relationships, and that curriculum is really cool because we go into schools. So right now we're in 10 schools throughout the Houston area, and we actually replace the existing health curriculum, which, as you guys are healthcare providers, you guys know that the health curriculum in high school sucks. And middle school, it sucks. It's not usually evidence-based. It's usually about 10 or 15 years old. So when I was getting to health class, it was dudes and mustaches and, big pants and no discussion of HIV then. And now that it's 2015, we're using the textbooks from 2005. There's no discussion of cyberbullying or sexting or these hookup apps or anything else, right? They're outdated. So this program actually replaces these outdated programs, and it's evidence-based and really focuses on promoting healthy relationships while also preventing a lot of these risky behaviors simultaneously. So now it becomes part of the class, becomes part of the health curriculum, and it's not an add-on program. So we train teachers to do it. So teachers do it. They like it. We give them all the materials. So and so far we've had pretty good luck. We are also applied for a grant to the National Institute of Health to actually evaluate this program in 7th graders. So it's been developed for 7th graders, but it's never been evaluated. So we're hoping that NIH gives us this money, and we'll start in the fall. 15 middle schools in Houston will get it, and 15 will not get it. We'll follow those kids for 4 years and hope that the kids that got the program are better off with respect to all 3 of these variables and just overall better health and better students and better people. Okay, so we mentioned this earlier, but this is related to reproductive coercion and just the risk of the correlation between IPV and STIs in women. And so we know that this can happen through forced sex with an infected partner. Has anyone read this is going to be a real bad tangent if no one raises their hand. But has anyone read the immortal story of Henrietta Lacks? Thank you. You and I, let's just talk. All right. So it's actually a really cool thing. So it's about the HeLa cells that that we've used in research forever, since the 40s or 50s, whenever she died, and it's kind of like an ethics, a study on ethics, in that they took these HeLa cells, her cells, Henrietta Lacks HeLa, without her permission, and they kind of became the cornerstone of all cell culture research since then. But it was interesting, as part of that was talking a lot about the forced sexual intercourse, and she had cervical cancer, and part of it was through HPV and through forced sex, and her husband was cheating around on her and acquired all those. One of her kids that were born, that's a major part of the story, was, and I can't remember the name, you guys will know it, but was syphilis, born with syphilis, and was mentally challenged from being born with the syphilis. And I'm sorry, I don't know the name, but it was really, that was another part of that book, is how related IPV and STI were. So also limited or compromised negotiation of safer sex practices. If he's forcing himself on you, it's very difficult to then negotiate safer sex. There's been some really crazy lawsuits that you guys probably have been aware of, where stranger rape, and the girl asked to put on a condom, and then the argument that they used was, if she put on a condom, that means that she must have been consensual. So really stupid laws or defenses used there. And then what we also see with IPV is increased risky sexual behavior. So when we look at surveillance, a lot of you guys might be familiar with these numbers. So this is from 2014. And you see pretty low numbers with 14 and under, about 200, a little over 200. But then when we start to get to 15 to 29, you see that number increase fairly rapidly in terms of number of diagnoses of HIV infection. So we mentioned this, but gay, bisexual, and other men who have sex with men is a very vulnerable population. We also, and other men who have sex with men is an interesting topic because there's a lot of folks that are on Backpage, and Backpage.com is basically a way to find prostitutes that you pay and meet up with and have sex. But we find a lot of these MSMs, men who like to have sex with men, that don't consider themselves gay or bisexual. We have a research coordinator that used to work for us. Now he's in private practice, but he did a lot of research on homosexuality, and I can't remember what they called themselves, but it was and how they searched for it. But it's pretty interesting. But that's happening quite a bit. What was it? Down low. Okay, so that's yeah. Okay, so we see a little bit higher increase in Black and Latino men and women. A lot of this might be related to socioeconomic status and lack of education in some of those schools, that they don't have as many resources, perhaps. And people who inject drugs, and then again, youth age 13 to 24 is the most vulnerable from an age standpoint. And then us in the South have a bit higher rates of HIV and STI rates. Okay, so dating mobile apps. So, how many of y'all have used dating mobile apps? Yeah, you're not going to raise your hand, I know. All right, so one of the things I do, and I forgot to do this, and I should have done it with you, is I asked how many of y'all have smartphones, and then everyone raises their hands, and then I ask how many of you sext. And there's usually a couple people that forget that they shouldn't raise their hand. So that was, forgot that, so you got off. You guys got lucky. All right, so we know that smartphones are increasing exponentially. These are actually pretty old data as far as what we know with smartphone usage and apps. It increases, I would say it's, in most of these cases, double all this. So we know that that most teens have smartphones. Both my kids have smartphones. And I imagine it doesn't matter what income bracket. If you go into any high school, it's going to be upwards of 95% of kids will have smartphones. And smartphones are essential because that's how all of this happens. So we do know that using dating apps increases accessibility to a potential partner. I'm filtering. I was going to tell a story of a friend that met someone, but I'm going to filter. I'm so good at not self-disclosing. All right, so increased accessibility to casual sex, no strings attached. So there's a lot of these within Tinder or Grindr. We'll talk about those in a second, where it is NSA contact, or Craigslist or anything else where it's NSA. So no strings attached, and it's meant just for sexual hookups. And so you're much more likely, it's easier now, right? Where before we had to go to a bar and wait till closing time. I don't know. I got married really young. So meetup happens instantly. It's kind of sex on demand. And then it really changes a lot. So I don't talk about this here, but there's like burner apps where you can actually download a burner app on your phone where it creates a whole new phone number for you that's called the burner phone. And you could contact a prostitute, a drug dealer, a random girl that you meet on one of these sites, and she can't, there's no back lookup or anything like that. It's a whole new number. When you delete the app, or when you can burn that number and you can never have it again, it's gone forever. All the information that's shared is gone forever. So that sort of stuff. So that is one of the things of new technology. There's the case in Colorado with sexting teenagers. I don't know if you guys remember, this was in the news a few months ago, and they were trading kind of sexting images, kind of like baseball cards, what they said. So I got called into that one to talk about some of the research that we've done. And one of the things that they did is this app called Calculator, where it looks like a calculator on your phone, and you put in a password, like a formula, and then that opens up the pictures where all the girls or guys are. So one thing, it doesn't do a whole lot of good. If you're looking at your kid's phone, it probably doesn't matter. You're not going to be able to find it. They're smarter than we are. So it's better just to kind of talk about healthy relationships rather than this monitoring of phones. So Tinder is, so this is an app. This actually came from Grindr. So Grindr is help me out if I get it wrong, but it's kind of like a GPS app for gay men to hook up with each other. So basically you can go on it, and with a picture of your photo and maybe a couple things that you're interested in general, and probably sexually as well, someone else can be on Grindr and say, oh, Joe's 2 buildings are, I don't think they give exact location, but kind of general area. Okay, Joe is in my general area. I'm going to shoot him a message, hey, want to meet up? And then he says yes, and then they find a location, and then maybe they have drinks and have sex or skip the drinks altogether. And so this was set up really for sexual hookups. It's not a pretend thing like Snapchat where we're going to just send each other photos of our kids playing. And this was set up for, so Tinder is the same thing, but for straight couples, or straight people rather. It's actually Thrinder, which is for couples that are looking to have a threesome. So, or single women who are looking to have a threesome with the couple. So there's Thrinder, Grindr, Tinder, and Tinder is, it's used, I wish I had the numbers on it, but it's millions of people are using Tinder daily. And if you hear a lot of this anecdotal stuff, it's meeting a different woman or a different girl or a different guy every day of the week, right? So there's also things like OkCupid that I think we have here in a second. This is another dating app, but so Tinder and Grindr are more for hookups. OkCupid is more for dating type thing. We have a friend that I think she went on 3 dates one night, so it was a legitimate thing using OkCupid, not a sexual thing. So we picked her brain about that. So Down is another thing similar. Blender is it's just like Grindr, but with the GPS searching. So Tinder doesn't have the GPS searching. Grindr has the GPS location. Blender has the GPS location for heterosexual couples. There's also Hotel or something like that, where you can check into the hotel that you're staying in and find other people that check into the hotel you're staying in, and then hook up that way. So it's happening quite a bit, and it's a lot of times us that are using these apps as well, not necessarily teens. That if you see, look at it's 25 to 34. I guess I'm older than that. Damn it. It used to be me. Sometimes I forget, like when I talk to my research coordinators and say like us or people like us, and then I realize that I'm 20 years older than them. That's sad. So another thing that's interesting is 1 in 5 dating app users are already in a relationship. So this thing comes in like, what's it? Ashley Madison. Valentine's Day is one of the busiest times, and then for whatever reason, 10 p.m. on Wednesday. Did we ever figure out why that was the case? Maybe like in between. Hump Day. I like it. Is that what you said? Well done. Why did I think of that? Jesus. I will never do this presentation again where I don't mention that, and I'm going to steal it. It's going to be my own, by the way. Sure. Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's true. I feel like I like to start planning like at Tuesday, like at 4 p.m. All right. So are they to blame for the increased HIV STI incidence? Again, I think that if we look at it, a lot of the rates have remained mostly the same. We have seen upticks in several behaviors and several STIs. Several STIs that we kind of thought were going away, are not necessarily going away, but we had a better control of, are now starting to come back. With the exception of pubic lice, we're sending that's becoming distinct because people are shaving their pubic regions. That's a true story. Not distinct, extinct is what I meant to say. They are distinctly gross. That's true. All right, so in looking at this research, over a 10-year period from 99 to 08, across 33 states, this was a pretty cool study, where they examined whether Craigslist increased HIV prevalence, and they found that in that time, and this was looking at Craigslist heavy cities versus Craigslist unheavy cities that were less likely to use Craigslist, and what we saw was an increase in HIV cases in which Craigslist was heavily used. And then Rhode Island, my former home of 2 years, had a increase in STDs from the state from 13 to 14, and this is where I was getting at with syphilis, 79% rise in syphilis cases, and this was attributed at least to a portion of it was to these more casual hookups that are happening. So other factors, health and sexual education. I think, and we talk a little bit about this. I think I have another slide on this. I want to check the time, make sure I don't abuse time. Is that it's not all bad news. So I think oftentimes when I come to these talks is that kids having smartphones is bad, people having these hookups is bad, and I'm actually a very sex positive person, and I think that we should do a better job of talking to kids that, it's not all bad, everything's bad, you're going to die. If you have sex, you're going to die. That's not true. And the kids know it too, because we talk about sex as if it's a good thing. They hear it on TV, on radio, as if it's a good thing. So if we tell them it's a bad thing and you're going to die and all that, well, then they're not going to pay attention to us. So I think we have to do a better job of saying why people have sex, what's good about it, what are the potential consequences, that sort of thing. So I think we need to do a better job at that. And I think, to my point about this, is we can use different apps and the technology that we have to reach these kids about proper, comprehensive sexual education, because they're not getting it right now in schools. In Texas, they're not getting it in schools. They really aren't. We need to do a better job, a much better job of that. Some schools do better. Some schools is comprehensive sexual education. Texas is mostly abstinent only. There's some districts that are more progressive, but a lot of schools are abstinence only, which is fine, but kids are going to have sex. So we should be doing better education, better prevention. Again, having access to testing sites. So I guess one of the take-home messages is that probably, I would say, yes, that these casual hookup sites have increased HIV and STI rates. I wouldn't say that we have definitive research that says, yes, absolutely 100%. I would also say on the flip side that we should not be scared of the new technology, and we should use them as health educators to our advantage in reaching these kids. So some things is knowing your app. So I am very careful to download a lot of the new apps onto my phone and know how they work. Because I have an 11-year-old boy and a 13-year-old girl, I want to know how they work. And I remember that one time I had my phone on and it had all the different things on it, including Snapchat. And my daughter looked at it and she goes, "Oh, you have Snapchat?" And then I could see her go, "Oh shit!" Like he knows. So I think it's really good as parents and as health educators to know what these are. I think we have a big tendency. I think it's less so now. But I think we have a real big tendency with new apps and new technology with kids, and I certainly have been there, is, you know what, I'm going to deal with this kid offline and real life stuff, and then we kind of ignore the whole online behaviors and say, you know what, that's their thing. I don't really know. I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to deal with it, whatever. But the problem is now for kids, it's no longer two different things. I think we still look a lot of it online, offline, but kids, it is their whole world, right? So online is no difference from offline. It's all become increasingly blurred. And so when we pay attention to only their offline lives, I think we do a real disservice to them. I think we have to pay attention to the whole part. So knowing that kind of stuff. And then for I think this is from a personal responsibility standpoint, is kids disclosing, knowing, I shouldn't say kids, teens, young adults, knowing and disclosing their HIV status. And I think mostly practicing safe sex. We know that safe sex can have, they cut into the rates exponentially. So there are some apps like the gay dating app Blued, which is popular in China, which is kind of surprising to me. But with all the pictures, they include this red ribbon to remind people of HIV. Grindr has also started encouraging users to get HIV tests, and then I think most importantly identifies testing centers that are near. And I think that came out of a lot of the reaction to people and this website. And then ability to reach vulnerable population through the apps themselves. So there's a study I was just talking to Liz about that is using an app from Apple to reach iPhone users, and it's a research app that they have where you can build your own research. And folks in North Carolina built this postpartum depression research that their goal is to reach 100,000 women globally to study postpartum depression and anxiety, and something that we couldn't have done 3 years ago. So that's an opportunity I think, for population level analyses. All right, questions? Yes.
Personal question. At what age did you start talking to your children?
No, it's a really good question, and I'm glad you asked it. So I'm a psychologist. And so I'm coming at this from a psychologist as opposed to a parent. I think that the sooner you do it, the better. If it's developed, make it age and developmentally appropriate. If that means 2 years old, again, very developmentally appropriate. If that's going to look a whole lot different than 5-year-olds, it's going to look a whole lot different than 10 and a whole lot different than 15. But the other thing about it that's important, so earlier and often, developmentally age appropriate. The other really important part of it, though, is we have to get away from telling patients and each other that it's a talk, because it's not a talk. It's an ongoing conversation. If we think of it as a talk, I guarantee you, the first time you have the talk with your kid, they already know everything. So it has to be a conversation that starts earlier, and it has to be an ongoing conversation. And my kids both, we use real words, penis and vagina, and we talk with our kids developmentally appropriately about it. And when something comes up on the news, we talk about what it means. We don't shield them. We're not inappropriate, but we don't shield them, and we talk about it, and we talk about, just like we do with, look, we don't want you to drink. We don't want you to do drugs. But if you do, don't ever drive. I will not care if you call me. I'll be disappointed, but, don't ever drive. And it's the same thing. We want you to wait to have sex. But if you do, wear a condom. Here's this. And we'll give, when the time is right, we'll give our kids condoms. So, but that's as a psychologist and as a parent, I mean, it's not necessarily the right way. I want to make sure that there's other ways to do it. My way is not necessarily the right way. Yes?
One thing to bring to mind, though, is like culture has a lot to do with me coming from a Hispanic background. My mother never and like you said, you talk to your kids home and that, and I'm asking my son, his friend, and and now that they're a little bit older, they go, Mom, we've learned more about you than we did in school.
Yeah. Yeah. Culture is so important, and I'm really glad you mentioned that, because and maybe that's why we see with some Latino adolescents is that we see higher rates, is because it is more of a taboo topic oftentimes, and if we're not talking about it in Texas, the school is not doing a good job of talking about it because of where we live. Peers are not going to talk about it, or they're going to get bad information, and then the media, they're going to get real bad information.
Parents also research for an area, and so we're not.
Yeah, no, I agree, and it's and so a lot of people, and are having, maybe will have anal sex instead of vaginal intercourse because that means they could retain their virginity. And so stuff like that. So if we're not having that talk with them, that conversation with them, they're going to fill in the blanks themselves. But you're right about schools too. I have a colleague of mine that does a lot of pregnancy prevention stuff up in Houston, pissed off the school so much, or actually not school, parents, actually a couple parents, that's all it takes, right? That she was on the news a couple times about trying to force kids to have sex. Obviously, that's not what she was doing. Someone published her phone number in one of the back pages of one of those magazines in Houston, so people were calling her requesting sex, thinking that was her. She was a prostitute. So people it's hard to do in Texas. There's another example, real quickly, of and I think I have a couple minutes. I'm consulting on the study in Miami where they are in Hispanic females, 7th grade females, where they're going into these schools, and they have this really, really cool kind of avatar game where they have the girl comes in, she creates an avatar, so a computer image that looks like her, and she actually interacts with another avatar who's someone playing a adolescent girl in a different city that says, hey, how are you? Let's go see what they're doing. And they go to a party, and they like, it's basically refusal skills and all that, but it's in the moment refusal skills. And Fox News, the local Fox News, picked up on the story and did a really great story about this. And she was pleased and all this, but then the national Fox News picked up the story and basically said, the headline was, should the feds give money to a video game that teaches kids how to have sex or something like that? So, and she got a lot of bad press from that. And so it's a tricky topic. People don't like to talk about sex and teens, but we have to, because if we don't, then they have really bad models and they fill it in themselves. Okay, I think we're out of time, but if you have other questions, I'll be around. Thank you guys very, very much.